So in John 21, remember, Peter, it seemed like he was kind of going back to his fishing, and then, Jesus said, cast a net on the right side of the boat and you will catch. And then they recognize, okay, it's the Lord. And Peter jumps into the sea with his clothing, and then he swims toward the Lord. But it's not like, don't picture this modern day deal of like going over and like hugging him or something. No, there's no such, it's not like that. And not only that, the context is where Peter had denied the Lord 3 times. So he's in a very ashamed, guilty state. So he does swim over. And then when Jesus says, bring some of the fish that you have caught, right away, Simon Peter, verse 11, he goes and drags the net to the land full of large fish. And then Jesus said to them, come and eat breakfast. And then they eat. So they have bread, verse 13, and they have fish. And then 15 now. So when they had eaten breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? Now you can kind of picture there would be, I think there would have been fire still for the, cooking of the fish. They had fire, and maybe for warmth. And then the disciples would be probably sitting around in a circle, probably, because that's just natural. So you can kind of picture that. And especially, Peter, he would jumped into the water, so it would have been cold. And so they're probably around the fire, and then after eating breakfast, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. Now, when it says, do you love me more than these? This is a little tricky. What does Jesus mean by these? So there are 3 different possibilities, but I think two more main possibilities. One, do you love me more than these, in the sense of with this fish and the fishing and the boats and stuff like that? I do consider that to be a possibility because of the whole going back to fishing. Because remember, when Jesus first called the disciples, Peter, Andrew brothers, James and John brothers, they're fishermen. That was their profession. But when Jesus called them, now you will catch men, they left everything to follow Christ. But by this time, even Peter having denied Jesus, there is something of him going back fishing. So I think this is a possibility. Do you love me more than this stuff, your profession, you going back? I think that's possible. But I do know that it seems like there are more scholars that believe that these is talking about the disciples, other disciples. So do you love me more than, so do you love me more than you love these other guys? Probably not. It's probably, do you love me more than these disciples love me? So that's what more scholars believe. But I am personally I'm really open to the whole fishing, going back to that in this context. I really think that's a possibility. But whichever one it is, Peter responds, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And then Jesus responds, basically, if that's the case, feed my lambs. Whenever I come to this passage, it's like hard to read this because it gets me teary-eyed because this is, I think, one of the most important passages for pastors. For anyone that believes that they're called to pastor. I know there are many passages in the New Testament about pastoring. There are many. There's Acts 20, there's 1 Peter 5, 1 Timothy 3, major passages. But I believe that this has to be one of those top ones. As a matter of fact, I think for me, this is the most how do you describe it? Conviction bringing passage that rips your heart in a way, understanding the Lord's heart. So Peter, if you love me, basically take care of my sheep, take care of my lambs. Of course, Jesus' lambs are his people, taking care of them, shepherding them. Do that well if you love me. Because I love my people very much. So if you love me, take care of my people well. See, a pastor needs to know the Lord Jesus loves his people like we don't know. And so that is supposed to get pastors to fear and pastor well. Because Jesus died for his church. He loves her very much. And so if you love me, take good care of my people. And then he said to him again, a second time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? He said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. He says it again, shepherd my sheep. And I mean, I don't think Jesus would have asked these like right away. I think it would have been, whether a few seconds or a minute or two, just some pause. And then asking the third time, he asked him a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And then Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And he said to him, Lord, you know all things. You know that I love you. And he said to him, feed my sheep. So, why would he have been grieved? Well, because it's like Peter had already answered, Lord, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And then up to the second time, it's kind of like, okay, it's not as big of a deal when you ask a second time. That happens many times. But when you ask the third time, it's like it would have just all the more just gotten him to just wake up and gotten him to take this seriously. The fact that he brings it up a third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And of course, as most recognize, why does Jesus ask him a third time? Well, it would correspond to Peter's denial of the Lord 3 times. So it's kind of like, you deny me 3 times. So in the restoring back as a disciple, he asked him, so you had said, you don't know me. You don't know me. You don't know me. But I'm going to ask you, do you love me? And he asked him 3 times. And so Peter was grieved because he said to him the third time, do you love me? And again, he says, you know all things, you know that I love you. And, Peter, of course, he would have never forgotten this. After Jesus leaves, Peter, he pastors, he's one of the leaders of the church. He would have been definitely one of the top leaders, if not, in a way, the top leader. We see that in Acts. And this would have always stuck to him. These people, however many hundreds, however many thousands, every single one, they're Jesus's sheep that he loves very much. And so pastoring correctly, pastoring well, for their true well-being, spiritual well-being, for them to really know Christ well, for them to really grow in their understanding of Christ, the most valuable things, all the more be captured by him, know about the gospel in depth, and all absolutely be captured by him, to feed that to the people of God. And then verse 18, most assuredly I say to you, when you were younger, you girded yourself and walked where you wished. But when you are old, so Jesus is prophesying, You will stretch out your hands, and another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. So the language of stretching out your hand, you can check different study Bibles and stuff. That language itself indicated when people get crucified. I'll just read a note. Stretch out your hands was a way to convey the notion of crucifixion. So that's what that communicated. And already, they're in a place where this is post-crucifixion and resurrection. And so Peter's already getting a hint. Oh, I'm going to be crucified also. So another will gird you and carry you where you do not wish. So Peter already knows his calling, what's going to happen. And 19, this he spoke, signifying by what death he would glorify God. So by his death, God would be glorified. He would be recognized. He would be known for how worthy he is for our death also. He's worthy of our death. He's worthy of our life and our death. And when he had spoken this, he said to him, follow me. Implying, I think now Jesus had gotten up and he's going. Then Peter, turning around, saw the disciple whom Jesus loved following, who had also leaned on Jesus' breast at the supper, and said, Lord, who is the one who betrays you? Peter, seeing him, said to Jesus, but Lord, what about this one? What about him? Jesus said to him, if I will that he remain till I come, what is that to you? You follow me. So most agree that this disciple whom Jesus loved is talking about John. And all throughout the Gospel of John, you see this kind of, like even in the tomb, like the two are running and one, John runs ahead, and at the dinner table, Lord's Supper, like one is leaning on the bosom, and there are all kinds of different hints that seem to indicate maybe there was this like rivalry aspect or something. Now we know Peter and John, they go back way into the past before discipleship because they were both fishermen. The four men were all fishermen, and they knew each other. They're like called together, I think in Matthew. But we know, we're quite sure John was a bit younger, but yeah, Peter and John, when you look at their character, Peter, we know he's passionate, and John, he's called like one of the sons of thunder, and they both seem to have this passionate aspect, so maybe that has to do with it also. But Jesus had just prophesied of how Peter would die to glorify God, and then Peter turning around as they're now walking, they're headed somewhere. Peter's walking, and then John is also following. And then Peter says to Jesus, but Lord, what about him? So basically, okay, I will be crucified, died like this. I wonder, what about him? And Jesus' answer is very important, as many note. If it's my will that he remains until I come back, what is that to you? You follow me. So basically, you be focused on your business. When it comes to that issue, it shouldn't matter to you. Even if he were to remain until I return, like remain alive, because it's implied that Peter's going to die, he's going to be crucified. But if he never dies and remains until I come back, what is that to you? You simply follow me. And so we get to learn from this that, of course, we care for each other. There's that part. But when it comes to this aspect of, there are certain things we don't get into each other's business of. There are certain things. For example, like how much maybe one minister and another minister he knows, a co-pastor or something, how much, popular or famous they become, that shouldn't be bothersome. That shouldn't be, a cause of jealousy. And I bring this up because the context is Peter and John, there seem to be this rivalry aspect. And that's what Peter has in mind. Okay, I'm going to be crucified that way, but what about him? That's the context. So when it comes to certain things like one Christian has more gifts, one Christian is more well-known or popular or respected, that should never be some cause of jealousy or envy or become my business. No, you just focus on following Christ. Okay? So there's that kind of thing. There's a lot of things where we care for each other, we get into each other's business because we love each other. But there are certain things like this where you don't do that. Just focus on following Christ, okay? And then 23, then this saying went out among the brethren that this disciple would not die. Yeah, Jesus did not say to him that he would not die, but simply that if he remained till I come, what is that to you? This is a disciple who testifies of these things, who wrote these things, and we know that his testimony is true. And there are also many other things that Jesus did, which if they were written one by one, I suppose that even the world itself could not contain the books that would be written. So, that's probably hyperbole, but the point is that Jesus did and taught so many important, essential things. And, through the apostles and the writers of the New Testament, we get what God wanted communicated to us, taught to us through the Gospels and the rest of the New Testament. But, so were there any thoughts or anything? So we see Peter's restoration here, asking Simon, do you love me more than these? Lord, you know that I love you. Well, then feed my lambs. If you love me, well, that love for me is connected to how you take care of my sheep. So, seriously, I think this is the most important passage in a way for pastors. Acts 20, those passages definitely are huge, but this here would be at least like parallel that, because in Acts 20, it says that, 20:28, pay careful attention to yourselves and to all the flock among which the Holy Spirit has appointed you overseers to shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. So Paul says something very similar, and he goes into this very same kind of thing. He points out, shepherd the church of God. He could have just ended it that way. He doesn't end it that way. He says, shepherd the church of God, which he purchased with his own blood. Keep that in mind. The church is God's flock that he purchased with his own blood, with his death. So when you have this core thing in mind, you will know how serious this business is of pastoring, how you pastor faithfully, how you keep in mind this is the Lord's people, and as much as I am about the Lord, he's everything to me. His people are so important to him. So how will I not do whatever I can to do the best to take good care of these people, pastor them well? Getting involved in their business, how they're actually doing. Sadly, in most of American Christianity, it's quite far away, where pastors actually know how the flock is actually doing. Now, I know churches differ, but overall, it's just, most churches are really, really bad, where they don't even know how most people are doing. There's barely any interaction. There's just a Sunday, maybe 15-minute, maybe brief talk, not even with everyone. Whether they're struggling with porn, or whether they're like marriage is falling apart, or how child raising is going, all kinds of things. There's just so much. I can't go into it, but just, so the love for the Lord, this is a call for pastors. How seriously you consider this business of pastoring. And, the fact that the Lord restores Peter, it's his mercy and compassion. The fact that he does that, he didn't have to. He didn't have any obligation to, but he restores him in his love and his kindness. And the high call of being martyred for his sake is a privilege. We have to have the correct understanding that when we suffer for his name, it's a privilege. I know us in America, it's so far away, but we should keep up with other brethren around the world through newsletters like Voice of the Martyrs and things, where we hear about their persecution, what they go through, imprisonment and death, and support them. But I guess you can ask the question, you ask yourself a question: if I got persecuted, if my property got lost, if the government or a mob of unbelievers basically ripped away whatever property I have, whatever stuff I own, maybe even, we're in different places. Family members may be too much for some people if my child gets killed because I'm a Christian. But if I got killed, me getting killed is probably easier for most parents, most Christian parents. If you're a Christian, it would be all parents, all Christian parents. Me getting killed is much more easy than my child getting killed for Christ. But if I got killed for the Lord's sake, would I consider that a privilege? So we can end with that question in mind. So I'll pray for us and keep going. Lord, how we got to see today in 1 Kings, just your word getting fulfilled. How when you declare something, when you set something, how it is already set. It has to come to pass, period. And how in the most amazing ways, sometimes in ridiculous ways, inconceivable ways, your word just gets fulfilled, period. How there is no way of avoiding it. How try to avoid it. Try to not let your word come to pass, but how that's just not possible. That's not going to work. How even his very blood getting licked by dogs, it got fulfilled. His chariot going to that very location, and the dogs licking the blood. Lord, how your word comes to pass, period. May we be faithful, like Micaiah, and even in the midst of pagan prophets and things around, standing firm on your word. And Lord, thank you for the restoration of Peter we can see, and with his failure, but how he got restored. And Lord, how he would have lived the rest of his life until his death. Lord, what a privilege and amazing life. Called as a shepherd, called as a disciple, and learning from you. And then the ups and downs, or the real down he experienced, but then getting restored. And then pastoring your church, leading. What he would have had in mind as he pastored. Lord, though most are not called to pastor, may we have the same heart of passion, and indeed caring for the flock, the brethren around us. The fact that, yes, thank God I am an important individual to Christ my Lord, but so is my brother right here, so is my sister right here. Very important to my Lord, how we treat one another. Lord, you prayed for the oneness of the church. May we be very, very serious and careful about it, how we serve each other. And Lord, I pray for pastors that they would fear you, and they would remember this passage about shepherding, that it's not some institution, it's a group of people that you died for. So, Lord, be glorified by your church, including whatever persecution, martyrdom. In Jesus' name, amen.